Gaming history is full of highs and lows, legendary triumphs and unforgettable disasters. And today, we're here to talk about one of the most baffling failures in recent memory. I'm talking about Multiversus. Just months after Concord, the PlayStation exclusive that burned through hundreds of millions only to flop in record time, we now have another high-profile disaster. But this time, the story of failure is even worse. So what happened to Multiversus? And how did a game with so much potential turn into one of the biggest collapses in gaming history? Let's break it all down. But before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed to Waz Up Nerd Insider, your #1 source for gaming, cinema, TV series, anime, and everything nerd culture. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Now let's dive into the downfall of Multiversus. The meteoric rise of Multiversus, a Smash clone with limitless potential. Back in 2022, Multiversus burst onto the scene as a promising new contender in the platform fighting genre. It was heavily inspired by Super Smash Bros., but it had a unique selling point: characters from across Warner Bros.' vast universe. Imagine a game where Batman could go toe-to-toe with Bugs Bunny, or Shaggy could brawl against Superman. It was a crossover dream come true. The game had everything going for it: a free-to-play model that made it accessible to millions, a diverse roster featuring beloved WB characters, a fun, fast-paced combat system that rivaled Smash Bros., regular updates and content drops, keeping players engaged, a strong esports potential that could have built a dedicated competitive scene. When the game launched in early access, it was an instant hit. Within just a few months, Multiversus had 20 million players, and it seemed like Warner Bros. Had struck gold. The hype was real, and fans believed they had finally found an alternative to Super Smash Bros. That would stand the test of time. However, beneath the surface, there were cracks in the foundation. Cracks that would eventually lead to its complete collapse. The mistakes that led to Multiversus's downfall. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The game had built a dedicated fan base, and the potential was limitless. However, a series of devastating missteps turned Multiversus from a rising star into a cautionary tale: the monetization disaster. One of the biggest missteps came with the official launch of the game in 2024. Up until this point, Multiversus had been in beta, where players could unlock characters at a reasonable pace. But once it officially launched, everything changed. The free-to-play model that had made the game accessible was now buried under an avalanche of microtransactions. Suddenly, unlocking characters required an excruciating grind, or worse, hefty real-world purchases. Skins and cosmetic items were priced at absurd levels, making even casual customization feel like a luxury. What had once been a fun, accessible fighting game had turned into a pay-to-play nightmare, and the players noticed. The backlash was immediate, with social media and gaming forums flooded with complaints. Players who had once defended the game now turned against it, accusing Warner Bros. Of greed and short-sightedness. The developers tried to downplay the criticism, but the damage had already been done. Beyond that, the Battle Pass system felt incredibly predatory. Unlike other free-to-play games that balance monetization with player engagement, Multiversus implemented an aggressive structure that forced players into an endless cycle of spending. The constant barrage of limited-time offers and overpriced skins felt less like a celebration of Warner Bros. Properties, and more like a desperate attempt to squeeze every penny from the fanbase. The stark contrast between the beta phase and the full release was so jarring that many players felt deceived. They had invested time and even money into the beta, believing that they were part of something great, only to find themselves locked out of essential content unless they were willing to pay exorbitant fees. This was the moment that many realized Multiversus was heading down the wrong path. A downgraded experience. If the predatory monetization wasn't bad enough, the official launch also came with a noticeable decline in quality. Features that players had grown to love were suddenly removed or altered beyond recognition. Fan-favorite game modes were stripped away, making the game feel barren compared to its promising beta phase. Character balance also took a hit, with once-beloved fighters being nerfed into oblivion, while others became frustratingly overpowered. The ranked mode, which should have been a highlight, felt uninspired and underdeveloped. Instead of rewarding skill and dedication, the ranking system felt arbitrary, leading to frustration among players. Additionally, lag and server instability became a frequent problem. What should have been a smooth online experience turned into a frustrating mess, with frequent disconnections, input lag, and matchmaking issues. Competitive players who had high hopes for Multiversus quickly abandoned ship in favor of more stable fighting games. It was as if the developers had taken everything that made Multiversus fun and watered it down to fit a corporate model that prioritized microtransactions over gameplay, ignoring player feedback. The most fatal mistake, however, was ignoring the community. Players were vocal about the issues plaguing Multiversus, from the predatory monetization to the lack of meaningful updates. But instead of addressing these concerns, Warner Bros. And the developers remained silent. Even as the player count dwindled, there were no significant changes, no attempts to win back the community. The game was left to rot, and the players felt abandoned. Compare this to games like No Man's Sky or Final Fantasy XIV, which turned their disastrous launches around by listening to player feedback. Warner Bros. Had the opportunity to make things right, but they chose not to. The player exodus from millions to a ghost town. At its peak, Multiversus had 153,000 concurrent players. That's an impressive number. But after the disastrous launch and the introduction of predatory monetization, the numbers tanked. Players abandoned the game in droves. The once active online community went silent. Even content creators stopped covering it, which was a death sentence for any live service game. By early 2025, Multiversus was on life support. And then, the final nail in the coffin came. Warner Bros. Announced the game was shutting down. The official end of Multiversus. In January 2025, Warner Bros. Made the shocking announcement: Multiversus was officially dead. Season 5 would be its final update, and the servers would shut down completely in May. Even worse, after the current season ends, the game will no longer be available for download. A game that had once been hailed as the next big thing in platform fighters had now become one of the biggest failures in gaming history. What can we learn from this? The fall of Multiversus is a cautionary tale. It had everything it needed to succeed: a killer concept, a beloved character roster, a strong start with millions of players. But greed and poor decisions doomed it. It serves as a reminder that gaming should always be about the players first. If you alienate your community, it doesn't matter how big your IP is, you will fail. So now, we ask you, what do you think was the real reason for Multiversus' failure? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your fellow gamers. We'll see you next time on What's Up Nerd Insider.